something that also needs to be addressed is what the reality is in regard to the damage Iran has managed to do to US military installations in the Middle East. They've bombed every single US base in the Gulf region. In fact, the first order of business for the Iranians was to take out our radar systems at these bases. And those radar systems give our soldiers early warning of missile attacks. They don't have that available anymore, which is why the United States isn't using those bases right now in these Gulf countries. Now, both the United States and Israel are also low on missile interceptors. We knew that about the United States. Now Israel is crying about it. Trump had to lift sanctions on Russia so that they could sell oil to India and essentially lessen the economic pain that people are feeling internationally due to the limited supply of oil and gas on the global market. And Russia is also selling a lot more fertilizer due to the Strait of Hormuz effectively being closed. A third of the world's fertilizer comes from that region of the world and is transported through the Strait of Hormuz. Since it's closed, there are concerns that there's going to be a global food shortage. But Russia also produces a lot of fertilizer, and as a result of this incredibly stupid war, Russia is now able to sell more of their fertilizer, thus canceling out much of the economic sanctions the US has imposed on Russia as a result of their war against Ukraine.
One of the other thirds of the fertilizer comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. So that should be a steady stream that we're okay on. I'm gonna read a couple super chats here because I think they're exactly on point. Gray Scout Epsilon said, perhaps imposing tariffs on your allies before asking them for help with an illegal war was a miscalculation. Yeah, pretty good point. And 00083 writes in on super chat. I do remember Israel. First, people say that they have a right to defend itself, so the same logic applies here. Iran has every right to defend itself.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Thank you for writing in and sharing that perspective, because if you notice, the foreign minister of Iran, he's been pretty generous with his time in the American media, right? They request that he do interviews, he does the interviews, and in almost every single case, they ask, well, why are you attacking these Gulf countries? No, they're attacking US bases and US embassies in these Gulf countries, or something I don't think they should do is attack like hotels, for instance, where they believe American soldiers are staying at. Yeah, this is what you should expect Iran to do. Of course, they're gonna retaliate if you start striking them, if you start killing their people. What do you want them to do? Just sit back and take it? Of course they're gonna do this. The fact that the US, the government, was blindsided, did not expect Iran to do what it's been doing in attacking these US bases in Gulf countries, like blows my mind, Jake.
Yeah, Ducey of all people for Fox News asked, you said you were really surprised that they attacked our bases and our Gulf allies. Do you think that maybe somebody made a mistake in your preparations in not letting you know that they might do that? And of course, he had gibberish as an answer, right? Oh, we're winning, everything's great, we decimated, their heads are gushing with blood. We need help, I'm sorry, NATO, please help us. Oh, wait, which one is it, jerk? All right, anyway, so obviously he doesn't have an answer to that. And that goes to the point about incredible lack of planning. Like Trump apparently thought, there's a different report, that he would be considered a wartime president and his polling would go up to 80%.
Oops.
And so he was like, well, I know, of course, Americans are gonna die, but my polling will improve. Okay, yes, but how are you going to get out of the war? Well, Iran will surrender. Well, what if Iran doesn't surrender, right? Oh my God, I can't believe they hit our bases. How could that not be your very first thought? Of course, we all know the answer, because the first 1 through 100 thoughts was, how do we help Israel? How do we protect Israel? How do we defend Israel? How do we help every precious Israeli citizen? You didn't think through, what if Iran hits the radar of the bases, then the bases become totally useless, because then you can't see incoming drones or missiles. That means that we have to abandon our bases, which is what I'm hearing now.
How do you attack a country with a formidable military, something that everyone knew, okay? Even like the top normies in the country knew. How do you do that when you know that you've depleted 25% of your missile interceptors by giving them to Israel and Ukraine, how do you enter a war with a formidable military?
And I think it's even worse than that. They actually, I mean, yeah, they gave some to Ukraine. My understanding is that we used about a quarter of them in the 12-day war with Iran, protecting Israel, of course, beloved Israel, right? So, but if we already used a quarter of them in 12 days, do the math. Look,
that's asking too much.
We're whistling past the graveyard here, which is like, we're gonna run out of interceptor missiles. We don't have an infinite supply, and they cost a lot of money. It costs about $4 million. Iranian drones cost 35,000. I don't know how much Iran has left. I really, genuinely don't know. I hear things like Iran has got all this 100,000 left. We've talked about that. And then I hear that, hey, you know what? The number of missiles and drones they've sent has been greatly reduced. So I don't know, but I do know that at some point we will run out of defensive missiles, and then there'll be a panic which they apparently haven't even thought through at all. Which is, what do we do with our ships when they have no defensive missiles? Are you just gonna let them sit there like sitting ducks? Or are you gonna do what we've done with our bases? Panic and pull out immediately, and then go to hotels where Iran finds you anyway and bombs, right? Thereby greatly angering United Arab Emirates, Saudis, etc. And so they haven't thought through a single thing.
Nothing.
So,
and that's the reason why, Cenk, Iran is not interested in a ceasefire, because at this point, this is a war of endurance, and Iran knows that the United States and Israel, they're low on interceptors. And on top of that, since Israel used this as an opportunity to go after Lebanon, well, Hezbollah actually wasn't as weak as the Israelis believed, and Hezbollah has been conducting strikes against Israel simultaneously with Iran.
Yeah.
Thus, further, depleting what they have left in terms of missile interceptors and things like that.
So, last two things on that. First, on Iran, Trump is not wrong that we've sunk most of their navy, destroyed all their planes, and done great damage to their nuclear program, which is actually obliterated, their ballistic missiles, etc. Okay, but that's why. But he thinks, hence we won. But Iran, and hence he thinks Iran is going to give up. But Iran's like, why would we give up? You've already done maximum damage to our entire infrastructure, and the Israelis are already bombing our oil facilities. Like, we have incurred about 90% of the damage we're gonna incur, and there's no way you can uproot us unless you come on the ground. And on the ground, everything flips and is our advantage. So they're like, no, we're not gonna stop, especially because if we stop, we know the minute we start building any new defenses, you're gonna come in and bomb again and again and again. So no, we do not only do we not surrender, we are not going to stop the war.
We are waiting for them.
Yeah, and so they have not, it appears that our guys, and maybe even the Israelis, didn't take that into account.
The Israelis don't care. We're the ones suffering the human and financial costs of this insanely stupid war. And by the way, the war is not going well for the United States when the neocon douchebags who had been cheerleading this war for many, many years are now turning around and saying, ooh, things are not going well. So for instance, on NPR, John Bolton, of all people, said that the plot for regime change has failed. Robert Kagan and Bill Kristol, two individuals I loathe, were essentially admitting that the US war on Iran was destroying the US empire. Okay, Robert Kagan in a podcast admitted that the Iran war was debilitating America's ability to wage a new Cold War on Russia and China and isolating the United States empire globally. By the way, I should note, South Korea is a little upset with the United States because we took the missile interceptors that we had in South Korea recently, we took them out for this war. And the whole purpose of those missile interceptors being located in South Korea was in case of a war with China.
And North Korea.
So
and
congratulations.
By the way, there is no country more vulnerable on planet Earth than South Korea. They could be decimated, like literally millions of people in minutes because of all the missiles and now the nukes that North Korea has pointed at Seoul, South Korea, and so many other cities in South Korea. And they are a top economy and a top ally that is, we've done everything we've ever asked them. And so now we're betraying them because Israel needs those interceptors. Who cares about you stupid South Koreans? There's only one precious ally, the one bribing all of our politicians. I know, giant coincidence. So last couple of things here. So why is Israel not helping with the ground troops? Why are they not helping with the Strait of Hormuz? Because they've got their entire army ready to invade southern Lebanon. So that's not an exaggeration. They have an enormous number of troops that they had already gotten ready ahead of this war, thinking, oh good, we'll have America fight Iran for us, we'll have them die on the ground, we'll have them die in the Strait of Hormuz, etc. And then meanwhile, while everybody else is busy, we'll sneak into Lebanon and annex more land. Okay, and then we'll tell Jake Tapper it's self-defense, and all of cable news will chant self-defense, self-defense, as they do another invasion. That's why they're not helping us on anything, because part of the point of this war was to distract everyone as they stole more land, in this case, Lebanon. Finally, Mark Levin tweets at me all the time. It's a fun thing. And so I wrote over the weekend the same thing I just told you guys, which is, why doesn't Israel send the 5,000 ground troops? Why do Americans have to die instead? And he quote tweeted, deport.
He's such a piece of crap.
No, it's okay. So wait, but I want to understand that better. So he says, if you support American troops not going to die, but that our ally in the war, and I said in that same tweet, the first one that he said deport to, 82% of Israelis wanted this war, only 21% of Americans did. So why do we have to die for your war? And he says, basically he's saying, if you don't agree that Americans should die instead of Israelis, we should deport you from America? Wait, I could make the counter argument that if you think that Americans should die instead of the Israelis for a war Israel wanted and started, that we should deport your hairy ass, okay? So what do you mean deport? Okay, so if you're a traitor and you say Americans should die instead of Israelis, we should think about, well, okay, are you coordinating with the Israeli government?
Of course he is, Jake. Of course
Are you an
he is.
Israeli asset? Are you a foreign agent?
Do you really think there'd be consequences if that were confirmed?
There's no consequence at all, guys. We already know. Look, I did a video about Tucker Carlson, super last thing here. Over the weekend, they're threatening to potentially arrest him. So, but wait a minute, Lindsey Graham has admitted that he worked with the Israeli government to convince Trump and the US government to go to war on Israel's behalf. If that's not a foreign agent, I don't know what is. That is directly coordinating with another government against our government's interests. So how come he hasn't been arrested? Oh, right, because people supporting Israel are above the law.